The arrow hit me between the shoulder blades at the exact moment I remembered my mother's last words to me. Do not shame us, Su-Ching. If you cannot secure his heart, secure his signature. The alliance is worth more than your life. I had never understood what she meant by that. Not until I was falling face first into the mud, the taste of copper flooding my tongue, and the sound of my brother's horse galloping away faded into the ringing in my ears. The Prince of Ning's soldiers were shouting orders somewhere behind me, but their voices seemed to come from the bottom of a well. My fingers clawed at the earth, trying to push myself up, but my body refused. Every muscle screamed. My lungs burned. And the arrow, that damned arrow, was still buried deep, its shaft splintered against a rock when I hit the ground. I died like that. Alone. Broken. A tool that had outlived its usefulness. Then I woke up. No, that isn't right. I didn't wake up. I was ripped from darkness by the most agonizing pain I have ever felt, not the arrow this time, but the sudden, violent awareness of my own flesh. My eyes flew open, and I was staring at the same muddy ground. The same shattered wine flask. The same horse manure and trampled grass. And the same torchlight dancing across the faces of soldiers who should have been long gone. I was back. At the moment of my death. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst. I rolled onto my stomach, gasping, and the first face I saw was my brother's, his bow still half drawn, his eyes wide with shock. She's not dead yet, he said. The exact same words he had said the first time. The exact same cold, detached tone. That's an inconvenience. Something inside me snapped. Not my will. My will had been forged in the fire of my first death. No, it was something more primal. A realization so sharp and clear it cut through the fog of pain and confusion like a blade. He had said those words before. He had stood over my dying body and called me an inconvenience. And then he had walked away. He had left me to bleed out in the dirt while his soldiers searched my belongings for the forged letter my father had planted on me, the letter that would frame me as a traitor and absolve the family of any connection to the Prince of Ning's failed rebellion. I knew all of this now. I knew the whole wretched scheme. My father had sold me to Zhou Li for a promise of troops, but when the Emperor's spies caught wind of the plot, he had panicked. He needed a scapegoat. And I was the perfect one, a daughter he could disown, a woman with no power of her own, a convenient corpse to pin every treasonous document on. But I was not a corpse. Not this time. I curled my fingers beneath me and felt the sharp edge of the porcelain shard from the broken flask. The same shard I had used to jam into Zhou Chen's thigh in my desperate, dying attempt to survive. This time, I gripped it tighter. This time, I did not hesitate. Zhou Li was dismounting, his boots landing inches from my face. I could smell the leather, the mud, and beneath it, the faint scent of jasmine from the courtesan he had visited before coming to the hunting grounds. He crouched beside me, and his hand reached out to turn my face toward him. I let him. I went limp, playing the dying girl, the broken sister, the helpless victim. Then I moved. I drove the shard upward with every shred of fury I possessed. It sliced through the cuff of his sleeve and bit deep into his wrist. He shouted a sound of pure, unexpected shock and jerked back. But I did not stop. I pushed myself off the ground, my broken leg screaming in protest, and launched myself at him. My fingers found his throat, and I squeezed with all the strength of a woman who had nothing left to lose. You should have made sure I was dead, I hissed into his ear. That was your first mistake. His guards were rushing toward us. I heard their footsteps, their shouts, the clatter of armor. But I also heard something else, the distant thunder of hooves. Lots of them. The Emperor's men were coming, just as they had before. But this time, Zhou Li was on the ground with my hands wrapped around his neck, and his soldiers were frozen in indecision. Kill me and risk killing their prince, or pull me off and risk a blade to his throat. Zhou Qin made the choice for them. He lunged forward, his own dagger drawn, but his leg, the leg I had not yet stabbed in this timeline, was healthy, and he was faster than I remembered. He grabbed my hair and yanked me backward, tearing a handful of it out by the roots. I screamed, but I did not let go of the shard. I twisted in his grip and drove it into his thigh instead. Blood sprayed across his pale robes, and his cry of pain was music to my ears. I told you, I spat, my voice raw. I am not dead. Not yet. The world erupted into chaos. Jolie was scrambling to his feet, blood streaming from his wrist, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Jochin was on the ground, clutching his leg, his eyes wild with pain. The soldiers were shouting conflicting orders, and the thunder of hooves grew louder, closer. Then the gates of the hunting grounds burst open, and a flood of Imperial cavalry poured through. The next few minutes were a blur of steel and shouting. I was shoved aside, trampled by men who were not my enemies and not my allies, just soldiers doing their duty. I watched as Jolie was dragged from his horse, his wrists bound, his protestations cut short by a sharp blow to the back of his head. Jochin tried to flee, but he could not run on a leg that was pouring blood onto the grass. They caught him before he made it 10 paces. And I was left alone, in the mud. With the arrow still buried in my shoulder, I collapsed onto my back, staring up at the gray sky, and I laughed. I laughed so hard my ribs ached and my vision swam. The soldiers stared at me like I was mad. Maybe I was. But I had done it. I had survived the moment that killed me. I had changed the outcome. The general who found me was the same one who had found me the first time, a man named Wei Ming. He knelt beside me, his kind eyes scanning my wounds, and he asked me the same question he had asked in my first life. You are the eldest daughter of the Minister of Rights. But this time, I did not answer the way I had before. In my first life, I had wept. I had begged for help. I had told him everything in a torrent of tears and fear, and he had believed me, but he had also pitied me. He had brought me to the Emperor as a broken thing, a victim to be pitted and then discarded. This time, I reached up and grabbed his wrist. I squeezed hard, harder than any broken girl should be able to. I am Su Qing, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. And I know exactly who tried to kill me tonight. I know every name, every connection, every letter. If you want the Prince of Ning's head, you will need me alive. Wei Ming's eyes narrowed. He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning behind his gaze. He was not a man who trusted easily. But he was also not a man who let opportunities slip through his fingers. His head is already mine, he said carefully. We caught him red-handed. What more could you possibly offer? I smiled. The smile I had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times, the one that made men think I was harmless, sweet, trustworthy. The one I had learned to use in my first life to survive the prince's court. His head is not the prize, I whispered. The prize is the network. The rebel generals. The ministers who funded his plot. The eunuchs who smuggled his letters to the northern border. My father knows them all. My mother keeps their ledgers. My brother delivers their gold. And I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I know where they keep the evidence. Wei Ming's grip on my arm tightened. You're selling your own family. I am selling the people who sold me, I corrected. There is a difference, General. They left me here to die. They put that arrow in my back. They are not my family. They are my executioners. And I intend to return the favor. He did not smile. But something in his eyes shifted, a respect, perhaps, or simply a recognition of a useful tool. He signaled to his men, and they brought a stretcher. I was lifted onto it, the arrow still in my shoulder, my broken leg splinted with rough wood. The journey back to the capital was agony, but I did not close my eyes. I did not allow myself to slip into unconsciousness. I had already died once in this body. I was not going to die again in the same night. By the time we reached the city gates, dawn was breaking over the rooftops of Chang'an. The streets were empty, the merchants still asleep, the beggars still huddled in their corners. But the palace was awake. I could see the lights blazing in the hall of heavenly purity, and I knew the emperor was waiting. He had probably been waiting all night, pacing the marble floors, his mind racing with accusations and suspicions. I was brought before him still covered in blood and mud. I did not kneel. I could not. My leg would not bend that way. Instead, I stood on one foot, my hand gripping the arm of the eunuch who had helped me through the doors, and I met the emperor's gaze head-on. He was young. Younger than I remembered. His face was sharp, his eyes dark and unreadable. He wore no crown, only a simple black robe, and his hands were clasped behind his back. He looked at me the way a merchant looks at a flawed piece of jade, weighing my worth, calculating my cost. "Su Qing," he said, "the daughter of the Minister of Rights, the betrothed of the Prince of Ning, the woman who nearly became a rebel bride." He stepped closer, and I could smell the incense on his robes, the faint scent of sandalwood and something sharper, like anger. "You have a lot to answer for." I did not flinch. I did not bow my head. I met his eyes and held them. "I have a lot to offer," I corrected. "Your Majesty, I know you have already arrested the prince. I know you are searching his quarters for evidence. But you will not find enough. He was too careful to leave his trail in plain sight. The real evidence is in my father's study, in my mother's sewing box, in my brother's saddlebags. I can give you those keys, Your Majesty. But I need something in return." His eyes narrowed. "You are in no position to bargain." "I am in the only position to bargain," I said. "Because I am the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. And I am the only one who will tell you." The silence stretched between us like a wire. The eunuch beside me was trembling, but I felt nothing but calm. I had died once. I had been betrayed by everyone I loved. I had crawled out of my own grave with nothing but a piece of broken porcelain and a burning need for vengeance. What could the Emperor possibly do to me that was worse than what I had already survived? He must have seen something in my eyes, because he stepped back. He turned away and walked to his throne, but he did not sit. He stood before it, his back to me, and spoke in a voice so low I almost missed it. 3 months. I will give you 3 months to prove your worth. If you deliver the heads of every conspirator, I will grant you a household and your freedom. If you fail, I will have you executed for treason alongside your family." I allowed myself a single, shallow breath. "I will not fail." He turned back to face me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "You are either the bravest woman I have ever met," he said, "or the most foolish." "I am the one who is still alive," I replied. "That is the only thing that matters." He did not argue. He waved his hand, and the eunuch led me away. I was taken to a small room in the Eastern Palace, a bare chamber with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking the garden. A physician came to tend to my wounds. The arrow was removed, the leg set, the cuts cleaned and bandaged. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I lay there and stared at the ceiling and planned. 3 months. I had 3 months to tear down everything my family had built. 3 months to expose every secret, every betrayal, every gold coin they had hidden in the walls of their mansion. My mother's ledgers. My father's letters. My brother's network of courtesans and spies. I knew them all. I had memorized them in my first life, desperate to be useful, desperate to prove I was more than a bargaining chip. Now I would use that knowledge as a weapon. I closed my eyes, and I let the pain wash over me like a wave. But beneath the pain, something else was growing. Something cold and sharp and unyielding. Vengeance. I would start with my mother's handmaiden, the one who carried the letters. Then my father's steward, the one who laundered the gold. Then my brother's favorite courtesan, the one who knew every name and every secret. I would peel them apart layer by layer until there was nothing left of the family that had thrown me away. And when I was done, I would stand in the ashes, and I would smile. The game had only just begun. But I already knew how it would end. The physician had barely finished wrapping my ribs when I sent him away. I had no time for rest. The sun was climbing over the eastern garden, and every minute I spent lying on this narrow bed was a minute my mother used to burn the ledgers and my father used to destroy the letters. They knew I was alive. They knew I was in the palace. They would be scrambling to cover their tracks, and I had to move faster than they could erase themselves. I pulled on the plain robes the eunuch had left for me, coarse gray cotton, nothing like the silks I had worn as the minister's daughter. Good. Let them see me dressed like a servant. Let them underestimate me. I had spent 18 years being invisible to them, and now I would use that invisibility like a blade. The first name on my list was Chunhua, my mother's personal maid. She had been with our household for 15 years, and she knew every secret that had ever passed through my mother's lips. She also had a weakness, a gambling addiction that had cost her 3 months' wages last year. I had discovered it by accident, overhearing her begging the kitchen boy for a loan. In my first life, I had kept her secret out of pity. This time, I would use it as leverage. I found her in the servants' quarters of the palace, huddled in a corner of the laundry yard. She was supposed to be delivering a message to my mother, a coded warning that I had survived and was speaking with the emperor, but the eunuch I had bribed with a jade hairpin had intercepted her and brought her here instead. She looked up as I approached, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Miss Sue," she whispered, and her voice cracked. "Please. I didn't mean any harm. I only did what your mother told me. I had no choice." I knelt beside her and I placed my hand on her shoulder. My touch was gentle, but my eyes were not. She flinched as if I had struck her. "I know you had no choice," I said softly. "I know my mother is a hard woman to refuse. I am not here to punish you, Chunhua. I am here to offer you a way out." Her eyes widened. A flicker of hope, quickly suppressed. A way out of what? I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Of the noose. When the Emperor's men search my mother's quarters, they will find her ledgers. They will find the letters. They will find the gold. And they will ask who delivered those letters to the northern generals. Who carried the payments to the rebel camps? Who sat outside my mother's door while she plotted treason?" She was shaking now, her fingers gripping the edge of the washtub so hard her knuckles turned white. "I didn't know what was in the letters. I swear it. She told me they were business correspondence. I never read a single one." "I believe you," I said. "But the Emperor's investigators won't. They will see a woman who served the Minister of Rights for 15 years, who carried sealed packets to and from the palace, who knew every visitor and every hour of every meeting. They will assume you were complicit. And they will hang you beside my mother." Chunhua let out a sob, muffled by her hand. "Please," she begged. "Please don't let them hang me. I have a daughter. She's only 5. She lives with my sister in the southern village. If I die, she'll have no one." I nodded slowly, as if I were considering her plea. In truth, I had already considered it. I knew about her daughter. I knew about the sister. I knew about the gambling debts and the threats from the loan sharks and the desperate hope that one more letter, one more delivery, would buy her freedom. That was what made her useful. That was what made her mine. "I will make you a deal," I said. "You will give me a list. Every letter you carried, every date, every recipient, every gold piece you were paid to deliver. You will write it all down. And you will swear to testify before the Emperor's council that my mother ordered you to send those letters, that she knew exactly what was in them, that she was the architect of the scheme." She nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, I'll do it. I'll tell them everything. And in return," I continued, "I will give you a new name, a new identity, and enough silver to start a new life with your daughter in a province far from here. The Emperor will grant you immunity. You will never have to carry another letter for anyone ever again." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she would collapse. But she steadied herself, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You are not the same girl who left the mansion," she said, her voice awed and terrified. "What happened to you in that hunting ground?" I smiled. The smile that made men think I was harmless. "I died," I said. "And I came back with a purpose." I left her with a eunuch guard and a brush and ink to write her confession. The list she produced was longer than I expected, 23 letters to 6 different rebel generals, delivered over the course of 2 years. Gold payments totaling 5,000 taels. Meetings arranged with northern spies who posed as silk merchants. My mother had been busier than I ever knew. But the real prize was the name at the bottom of the list. A man I had not expected to see. The Prince of Ning's chief steward, a man named Fengyu, who had been my mother's intermediary with the rebels. He was the one who had handed her the gold, who had instructed her on which generals to bribe, who had coordinated the timing of the rebellion. And he was still in the city, hiding in a brothel in the eastern quarter, waiting for word of the prince's fate. I had to move quickly. Fengyu was a professional. He would not be as easy to break as Chunhua. He had been a spy for 20 years, and he knew every trick in the book. But he also had one weakness that I remembered from my first life, a son. a bastard son, living in a small village outside the city walls, whom he had never acknowledged but secretly supported. The boy was 12, training to be a blacksmith's apprentice, and he had no idea his father was a traitor. I did not relish the thought of threatening a child. But I also did not have the luxury of mercy. Not when my father's soldiers were probably already searching for a way to kill me before I could testify. I changed into a servant's clothes and slipped out of the palace through a side gate. The capital was alive with rumors. The arrest of the Prince of Ning had sent shockwaves through every noble household, and the streets were thick with whispered speculation. The merchants in the eastern quarter were nervous, their trade disrupted by the soldiers patrolling the main avenues. The brothels, however, were doing a brisk business. The nobles who feared for their own necks were seeking comfort in the usual ways. Fengyu was in a room above the Lotus Garden, the most infamous brothel in the city. I had never been inside such a place in my first life, but I had heard enough from my brother's drunken boasts to know the layout. The front entrance was guarded, but there was a back stairway used by the servants. I bribed a kitchen girl with a silver coin and climbed the creaking steps to the second floor. The room was small, dimly lit, and reeked of cheap incense and spilled wine. Fengyu was sitting at a low table, a half-empty flask in his hand, his eyes red-rimmed and glassy. He looked up as I entered, and his hand went instinctively to the dagger at his belt. "You have a son," I said, before he could speak. "His name is Wei. He lives in the village of Liang, west of the city. He is apprenticed to a blacksmith named Old Zhang. He has never met you, but he carries your eyes." Fengyu went very still. The dagger was half-drawn, his knuckles white around the grip. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want?" "I am Su Qing," I said, stepping into the lamplight. "Daughter of the Minister of Rights. Former betrothed of your prince. The woman your master tried to kill." "I want the same thing you do, Fengyu. I want to survive. But I can only survive if I have something to trade. And you have something I need." He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You think I'm going to betray my prince? I've served him for 20 years. I've taken oaths. I've bled for him. I think you're going to do whatever it takes to keep your son alive," I said calmly. "Because I know exactly what the Emperor's men will do to the child of a traitor. They will hang him in the public square and leave his body to rot as a warning. Unless you give me what I need." He stared at me, his face a mask of conflict. I could see the battle in his eyes, loyalty versus love, honor versus self-preservation. It was not a battle he could win. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want the names of every general who took my mother's gold. I want the dates of every meeting, the location of every safe house, the password for every courier network. I want the details of the rebellion's next move. Your prince is in chains, Fengyu. The rebellion is over. Don't let your son die for a lost cause." He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. It was worn and creased, clearly carried close to his heart for a long time. "This is everything," he said, placing it on the table. "Every name, every date, every gold piece. The rebellion's treasury is hidden in a warehouse outside the northern gate. The generals are planning to meet in 3 days to decide their next move. It's all here." I took the parchment and tucked it into my sleeve. I did not smile. I did not thank him. I simply nodded. "You will have your son," I said. "I will ensure he is protected. But you will have to disappear. If my father finds out what you've done, he will hunt you to the ends of the empire." Fengyu nodded slowly. "I know." He looked at me with something like respect. "You're not what I expected, Su Qing. The others, your family, they think you're a victim. They think you're weak. But you're not, are you? You're the most dangerous one of all." I turned to leave, but his words stopped me at the door. "There is one thing the parchment doesn't mention," he said. "One name I could not bring myself to write down. Your mother's sister. Your aunt, the Lady Zhao. She is the one who funded the rebellion. She used her own dowry to buy the gold. She has been working with the Northerners for years, longer than your father ever knew. The Emperor's council includes 2 of her allies. If you expose her, you will have more enemies than you can count." I paused, my hand on the doorframe. "Lady Zhao. My mother's sister, the widow of a general who had died in the northern campaigns. She had always been kind to me in my first life, sending me gifts on my birthday, writing letters of encouragement when I was trapped in the prince's court. I had never suspected her, but that was the problem with my first life. I had trusted too easily. I had seen kindness where there was only manipulation, love where there was only interest. I would not make that mistake again. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "You have given me more than you know." I left the brothel and made my way back to the palace, the parchment tucked safely against my chest. The sun was setting, painting the rooftops in shades of orange and red. The city was quiet, the soldiers patrolling the streets with torches and drawn swords. Everything was in motion. The emperor's investigation was expanding, reaching into every corner of the capital, and I was the one pulling the strings. I entered the palace through the side gate, and the eunuch who had been watching for me led me straight to the Hall of Heavenly Purity. The emperor was there, seated on his throne, his face unreadable. I knelt before him, my legs still ached, but I had learned to hide the pain, and placed the parchment on the marble floor. "I have names," I said. "I have dates. I have evidence. The rebellion is not dead, Your Majesty. It is only sleeping, and it will wake again in 3 days, when the generals meet in the northern capital. If you want to crush them once and for all, you will have to move quickly." He rose from his throne and walked toward me. He picked up the parchment and read it slowly, his eyes scanning each name. When he was finished, he looked at me with an expression I could not quite read: curiosity, perhaps, or respect. "You are proving to be more useful than I expected, Su-ching," he said. "But you are also proving to be more dangerous. A woman who can turn a maid, a steward, and a traitor in a single day is not a woman I can easily trust. What is your endgame? What do you truly want?" I looked up at him, and I let him see the fire in my eyes. The fire that had been born in the mud of the hunting grounds. The fire that would burn my family to the ground. "I want to watch them fall," I said. "Every single one of them. I want to stand in the ashes of their legacy and know that I built the fire. That is all I want. And when it is done, I will walk away and never look back." The emperor studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. 3 days, he said. "When the generals meet, I will have my army waiting. You will be there to identify them. And when it is over, you will have your vengeance. But know this, Su-ching, once you set this fire, there is no way to put it out. You will be changed. You will be marked. There will be no returning to the woman you once were." I smiled. That smile. "That woman died in the mud, Your Majesty. I am what came after." He did not argue. He simply waved his hand, and I was dismissed. I walked out of the Hall of Heavenly Purity and into the moonlit garden. The night was cool and still, and the stars were beginning to appear in the sky above the palace walls. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and I allowed myself one small, private moment of victory. 3 days. In 3 days, the generals would meet. In 3 days, my mother's ledgers would be laid bare. In 3 days, my father's treason would be exposed. In 3 days, my brother would learn what it meant to call me an inconvenience. But as I stood there, a shadow moved at the edge of the garden. I turned, my hand reaching for the dagger I had hidden in my sleeve, and I saw a figure step out of the darkness. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the gray robes of a palace guard. He had a scar running down his left cheek, and his eyes were cold and hard. "Lady Zhao sends her regards," he said. And then he lunged. The blade came at my throat with the speed of a striking snake. I had no time to think, only to move. My body remembered the hunting ground, remembered the mud and the blood and the searing pain of an arrow between my shoulders. I dropped to the ground, rolling sideways, and the dagger sliced through the air where my neck had been. The scarred guard stumbled forward, off balance, and I used the momentum to kick his knee from beneath him. He crashed onto the garden path with a grunt of surprise, but he was faster than I expected. He twisted, his hand shooting out to grab my ankle, and he yanked me toward him. I hit the ground hard, my broken leg screaming in protest. The dagger was still in his other hand, and he brought it down toward my chest. I caught his wrist with both hands, my muscles straining against his strength. He was larger than me, heavier, and his weight pressed down like a stone. The tip of the blade inched closer to my heart, and I could smell the garlic on his breath, the sweat on his skin, the faint, metallic tang of blood from a wound I had not yet inflicted. Lady Zhao sends her regards, he repeated, his voice a rasping whisper. She says you should have stayed dead. I laughed. I could not help it. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest, raw and wild and utterly mad. He hesitated, just for a moment, and that hesitation was all I needed. I bucked my hips, throwing him off balance, and drove my knee into his groin. He gasped, his grip loosening, and I twisted the dagger out of his hand. The blade flipped in the air, and I caught it by the hilt and drove it into his shoulder. Not deep enough to kill. Just deep enough to hurt. He howled, rolling off me, clutching the wound. I scrambled to my feet, my leg burning with every movement, and I stood over him with the dagger still in my hand. Tell Lady Zhao, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart, that I have a message for her as well. The next time she sends a man to kill me, she should send one who can finish the job. His eyes widened, and for a moment I saw fear in them. Good. Let him be afraid. Let him carry that fear back to my aunt and plant it in her heart like a seed. Let it grow and twist and consume her, the same way her betrayal had consumed every shred of love I had ever felt for her. But I could not kill him. Not here. Not now. The Emperor's guards were already running toward us, their torches blazing, their swords drawn. I stepped back, letting them take him. They dragged him away, his shoulder bleeding, his curses echoing off the garden walls. I watched him go, and when he was gone, I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. The Emperor appeared at the edge of the garden, his robes billowing in the night wind. He had not been in the Hall of Heavenly Purity when I left. He had been watching from the shadows, testing me. I knew it now. He had let the assassin reach me because he wanted to see what I would do. Whether I would fight or flee. Whether I would survive. I had passed his test. But I did not feel victorious. I felt cold. Hollow. The same cold I had felt in the mud of the hunting ground when I realized that no one was coming to save me. Lady Zhao has made her move, the Emperor said, stepping closer. He was looking at me with that same unreadable expression, but there was something new in his eyes now. Something like approval. She knows you are a threat. She will not stop until you are dead. I nodded, wiping the blood from my hands onto my robes. Then I will have to kill her first. The Emperor did not argue. He simply gestured for me to follow him, and I limped behind him through the winding corridors of the palace. We passed guards and eunuchs, all of whom bowed deeply and refused to meet my eyes. Word of the assassination attempt had already spread. I was no longer just the minister's discarded daughter. I was the woman who had survived a blade in the garden, the woman who had turned the Prince of Ning's steward, the woman who had shaken the foundations of the court. I was dangerous. And dangerous women did not live long in the palace. The Emperor led me to a small chamber in the eastern wing, a room I had never seen before. It was sparsely furnished, a table, 2 chairs, a brazier glowing with coals. On the table was a map of the empire, marked with tiny flags and annotations. The Emperor gestured for me to sit, and I did, my leg throbbing with every movement. Feng Yu's confession is being verified, he said, taking the seat across from me. His information matches what my spies have gathered. The generals will meet in 3 days, as you said. But there is a complication. He pointed to a flag on the map, planted at the northern border. The northern generals have been receiving funding from a source we have not yet identified. Feng Yu's confession names Lady Zhao as the financier, but my spies say she is not acting alone. There is someone else. Someone higher up. Someone in the palace itself. I stared at the map, my mind racing. Someone in the palace. The Emperor's council was full of men who had their own agendas, their own loyalties. But there was one name that kept surfacing in my thoughts, a name I had tried to push away. The Empress Dowager, I said quietly. She has always favored the northern generals. She has ties to the military families that date back to her own father's campaigns. If she is involved, the Emperor's expression darkened. If she is involved, then this rebellion is not just a plot by disgruntled generals. It is a coup. A move to replace me with someone who will serve her interests. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the accusations settling between us. The Empress Dowager was a powerful woman, the mother of the late emperor and the grandmother of the current one. She had ruled as regent for years before stepping aside, but her influence still permeated every corner of the court. If she was behind the rebellion, then the emperor was in more danger than I had realized. "There is something else," the emperor said, his voice low. "Something I have not told anyone. The generals are not just planning to meet. They are planning to move. They have an army assembled at the northern pass, waiting for the signal. If they march south, they will reach the capital in a week. We do not have a week. We have 3 days." He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that I had not expected. Desperation. He was afraid. The emperor of the Middle Kingdom, the ruler of all under heaven, was afraid. And he was looking at me as if I were his only hope. "I need you to go north," he said. "To the army camp. I need you to deliver a message to the generals. A false message, telling them the rebellion has been discovered and they must flee immediately. If they scatter, we can pick them off one by one. If they march, we lose." I blinked, my mind struggling to process his words. "You want me to go into the enemy camp alone? The generals know you. They will recognize you as the daughter of the Minister of Rights, the betrothed of the Prince of Ning. They will believe you come with news from the prince. They will not suspect you." I almost laughed. Almost. "And what if they do suspect me? What if they see through the lie and kill me on the spot?" The emperor's gaze was steady. "Then you will die a martyr. And I will avenge you. I will send 1,000 soldiers to burn their camp to the ground and scatter their ashes to the wind." It was not a comforting promise. But it was honest. And honesty, I had learned, was rarer than gold in the palace. I rose from my chair, my legs screaming in protest. "I will do it," I said. "But I have conditions. First, you will release Chenhua and Feng Yu and their families. They have told you everything they know. They are no longer a threat to you, and they deserve a chance to start new lives." The emperor nodded. "Granted. Second, you will protect the son of Feng Yu. He is innocent. He does not know what his father did. He should not suffer for his father's crimes." "Granted. And third," I paused, looking him directly in the eye. "When this is over, you will give me my mother's ledgers. The complete set. I want to know every name, every date, every transaction. I want to know exactly who bought my life and at what price." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded again. "Granted. But I have a condition of my own. When you go north, you will take a companion. A guard. Someone who can protect you if the generals turn hostile." I opened my mouth to argue, but he raised his hand, silencing me. "You are no good to me dead, Su Qing. And you are no good to me injured. You need someone who can fight. Someone who can carry you out if you cannot walk." I did not want a companion. I did not want anyone slowing me down or watching my back. But I recognized the wisdom in his words, and I bowed my head in reluctant agreement. The next morning, I was introduced to my companion. His name was Weijia, a captain in the emperor's personal guard. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek, the same scar I had seen on the assassin last night. My heart leaped into my throat, and my hand went instinctively to the dagger at my belt. But the emperor was already shaking his head. "Weijia has served me for 10 years, he said. "He is the one who captured the assassin you wounded. He is loyal. He is also the only man in my guard with knowledge of the northern terrain." Weijia knelt before me, his head bowed. I studied him, searching for any sign of deception. He met my gaze without flinching, his eyes calm and steady. "I will protect you with my life," he said. "On my honor as a soldier of the Imperial Guard." I did not trust him. I did not trust anyone. But I nodded, and the preparations began. We left the capital that night, riding under cover of darkness, the Emperor's seal tucked into my sleeve. The road north was cold and wet, and my broken leg ached with every mile. But I did not complain. I did not slow down. I kept my eyes fixed on the horizon and my hand on my dagger. We rode for 2 days, through forests and across rivers, past villages that had been abandoned and fields that had been burned. The signs of rebellion were everywhere: scorched earth, empty homes, the ghosts of people who had fled or died. By the time we reached the northern pass, I was exhausted, my body screaming for rest. But I could not rest. The general's camp was just ahead, its fires glowing in the distance. I could hear the sounds of the soldiers shouting, laughing, the clang of metal on metal. They were not expecting an attack. They were not expecting anyone from the capital. We dismounted at the edge of the forest, and Weijia handed me a torch. "We will approach on foot," he said. "They will see the light and come to meet us. You will speak. I will stand behind you and watch your back." I nodded, my heart pounding. The torch flickered in my hand, casting dancing shadows across the trees. I took a deep breath, and I stepped out of the forest. The generals came to meet me, as Weijia had predicted. They were a motley group, old men with gray beards and young men with hungry eyes, all of them dressed in the tattered uniforms of soldiers who had seen too many battles. Their leader was a man named General Sun, a hulking brute with a scarred face and a missing ear. He looked at me with suspicion, his hand on his sword. "Su Qing," he said, his voice like gravel. "I did not expect to see you here." "Is the prince dead?" I smiled. "That smile." "The prince is alive, General. But the emperor is closing in. He knows about the meeting. He knows about the army. He knows everything. You have to scatter. Tonight. Before his soldiers arrive." General Sun's eyes narrowed. "And why should I trust you? You are the daughter of the Minister of Rights. You were betrothed to the prince. But you are also the one who turned on him. You betrayed him to the emperor." I stepped closer, my smile never wavering. "I betrayed him because he tried to kill me. I am not loyal to the emperor, General. I am loyal to myself. And right now, the emperor is the only one who can keep me alive. So I am telling you the truth. Scatter. Flee. Or die." He studied me for a long moment. Then he laughed. The sound was harsh and bitter, echoing off the mountains. "You are either the bravest woman I have ever met," he said, "or the most foolish. But I believe you. I have seen the emperor's soldiers on the move. They are coming. We will scatter tonight. But before we go," he stepped closer, his hand reaching for my chin. "I want something from you. A token. A gesture of good faith." He grabbed my wrist, his grip iron-tight, and he pulled me toward him. Weijia moved, but I raised my hand, stopping him. I looked into General Sun's eyes, and I saw what he wanted. He wanted a promise. A guarantee that I was not a spy. "I will give you a token," I said, my voice steady. "I will tell you where the emperor is weakest, where his defenses are thinnest. But you have to let me go first." He released me, and I stepped back, my heart racing. I had just bought myself a few moments. A few moments to figure out how to escape. A few moments to save my life. And then I saw it. A flicker of movement in the shadows behind General Sunday. A figure in black, moving silently, a blade in hand. The Empress Dowager's assassin had found me. And this time, he would not stop at a single strike. This time, he would finish the job. The blade in the shadows caught the firelight for just an instant. That was enough. I threw myself sideways, crashing into General Sun, and the knife meant for my heart sliced through the air where I had been standing. The assassin stumbled, off balance, and Weijia was already moving. His sword came out in a single fluid motion, and the steel clashed with the assassin's blade in a shower of sparks. General Sun shoved me away, his hand going to his own weapon. "What is this?" he roared. "You bring assassins to my camp." "I brought nothing," I said, scrambling to my feet. "That man serves the Empress Dowager. He's been hunting me since I left the capital." The assassin disengaged from Weijia and turned toward me, his face hidden beneath a black hood. He moved like a dancer, quick, graceful, and utterly lethal. I had no weapon, no armor, no way to fight him. But I had something better. I had a crowd of confused, angry generals who didn't know who to trust. "He's here to kill me," I shouted, pitching my voice to carry across the clearing. "But if he kills me, he'll kill everyone who saw him. The Empress Dowager does not leave witnesses." The generals exchanged glances. They were hardened men, killers and schemers, but they were also survivors. And survivors knew when to run. General Sun made the decision first. "Seize him," he ordered, pointing at the assassin. "I want him alive." The soldiers rushed forward. a tide of men in ragged uniforms, and the assassin turned to flee. But there were too many of them. They swarmed him, dragging him down, and the knife clattered to the ground. Weijia was there in an instant, pressing his sword against the assassin's throat. "Who sent you?" Weijia demanded. "Speak, or I'll open your throat." The assassin laughed. A thin, reedy sound that made my skin crawl. "You think you can stop her? She has already won. By the time you return to the capital, the throne will have a new occupant. The Empress Dowager has moved." My blood went cold. The Empress Dowager had moved. She wasn't waiting for the generals to scatter. She was striking now, while the Emperor was alone, while his guards were distracted by the rebellion. I grabbed General Sun's arm. "You have to march," I said. "Now. Not to attack the Emperor. To save him. If the Empress Dowager takes the throne, she will hunt down every one of you. She doesn't need your army. She has her own. She will crush you like insects." He stared at me, his scarred face unreadable. "And why should I believe you? You've lied to me twice tonight." I met his gaze without flinching. "I lied to save my life. That's the only reason. But I'm telling you the truth now. The Empress Dowager wants to replace the Emperor with a puppet. And when she does, she won't need the northern generals anymore. She'll burn you all to the ground." The soldiers holding the assassin dragged him to his feet, his hood pulled back to reveal a gaunt face with hollow eyes. He was young, younger than I expected, but his expression was ancient and cold. "The Empress Dowager will reward whoever brings her your head," he said, his eyes fixed on me. "She will make you a prince, General Sunday. A prince with lands and titles and wealth beyond your imagination." General Sun looked at me, then at the assassin. The temptation was written all over his face. He could hand me over, claim the reward, and join the winning side. It was the safest choice. The smartest choice. I saw his hand move toward his sword, and my heart stopped. "You really are stupid," I said, letting my voice go hard and sharp. "Do you think she'll let you live? Do you think she'll share power with a barbarian general from the north? You'll be the first head she mounts on her wall. She's using you, just like she used everyone else." The general's hand paused. I had seen the hesitation in his eyes, the flicker of doubt. "I pressed my advantage. Weijia's soldiers are waiting in the pass," I lied, gesturing vaguely toward the darkness. 500 men, armed with imperial steel. "If I'm not back in an hour, they'll attack this camp and slaughter everyone. But if you help me stop the Empress Dowager, I'll ensure you're pardoned. Every single one of you. Full amnesty. Lands and titles, just like the assassin promised. But from the Emperor, not from a woman who's already tried to kill him." The silence stretched out like a wire about to snap. General Sun looked at his men. His generals. His soldiers. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. He was their leader, their commander, the man they had chosen to follow into rebellion. And he was about to choose the side that would keep them alive. "March," he said finally, his voice hoarse. We marched south. To the capital. To save the Emperor. The camp erupted into chaos, men running to their horses, soldiers grabbing weapons, the clatter of armor and the shouts of officers. Weijia appeared at my side, his sword still drawn, his eyes scanning the crowd for any more threats. "You lied to him," he said, his voice low. "There are no soldiers in the pass." "Of course I lied," I said. "Do you think I'd tell him the truth?" I mounted the horse they brought me, my broken leg screaming in protest. General Sun rode at the head of the column, his face grim. The assassin was bound and thrown into a cart, his hollow eyes still fixed on me with a hatred so pure it was almost admirable. We rode through the night, the northern army thundering behind us. The road was rough, the terrain unforgiving, but we pushed the horses hard. There was no time to rest. No time to think. Only the relentless pounding of hooves and the cold wind in my face. By dawn, we reached the outskirts of the capital. The city gates were closed, barred from the inside. Smoke rose from the palace, thick and black, staining the sky like an open wound. "She's already inside," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We're too late." General Sun reined in his horse beside me. "We're not too late. Not yet. There's a tunnel under the eastern wall. Old smuggler's route. My men used it during the last war. It leads into the palace gardens. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something other than suspicion in his eyes. Something like determination. He had chosen his side, and now he was committed. "I'll lead the men through the tunnel," he said. "You and your guard will find the Emperor. Get him out. We'll hold off the Empress Dowager's soldiers as long as we can." I nodded, and we dismounted. The tunnel was narrow and dark, the walls slick with moss and the air thick with the smell of damp earth. Weijia went first, his sword drawn, and I followed close behind. General Sun and his men brought up the rear, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. We emerged in the palace gardens, the same gardens where I had fought the assassin just days ago. But everything had changed. The hedges were trampled, the flower beds churned into mud. Soldiers in the Empress Dowager's livery swarmed the courtyard, their torches casting flickering shadows across the marble walls. We moved quickly, staying in the shadows, avoiding the patrols. Weijia knew the palace better than I did, and he led us through a maze of corridors and hidden passages until we reached the Hall of Heavenly Purity. The doors were barred from the inside, and we could hear shouting from within. "She's in there," I whispered. "The Emperor is trapped." Weijia motioned for me to stay back, and he pressed his ear against the door. His face darkened. "There's fighting inside. The Emperor's guard is holding, but they're outnumbered." I looked around, searching for something, anything, that could give us an advantage. And then I saw it. A small door, almost hidden behind a tapestry, leading to a narrow staircase. "The servant's entrance. This way," I said, pulling Weijia toward it. We climbed the stairs, emerging in a small antechamber behind the throne. The sounds of fighting were louder here, the clash of steel, the shouts of men, the screams of the dying. I peered through a crack in the door, and my heart sank. The Empress Dowager was there, seated on the throne as if she had always belonged there. She was dressed in gold and crimson, her silver hair pulled back in an elaborate coiffure. Her face was calm, almost serene, as she watched the chaos unfold before her. The Emperor was backed against a pillar, his sword bloody, his robes torn. 3 of his guards still stood between him and the Empress Dowager's soldiers, but they were wounded, exhausted, and outnumbered. "We have to get him out," I said. "Now." Weijia nodded, and he kicked the door open. The Empress Dowager's head snapped toward us, and for a moment, I saw surprise flicker in her cold eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the same serene calm. "Su Qing," she said, her voice like silk. "I should have known you would survive. You're more like me than you realize." I stepped into the hall, my dagger in my hand. "I am nothing like you," I said. "I don't kill my own family." She laughed. The sound was beautiful, musical, and utterly chilling. "Don't you? Your father, your mother, your brother, they're all dead, Su Qing. I had them executed this morning. Their heads are mounted on the eastern gate. And you're the one who killed them. Your testimony, your evidence, your betrayal. They died because of you." The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, my mother, my brother, dead, executed. Their heads on the eastern gate. I had wanted vengeance. I had wanted them to suffer. But I had not expected this. I had not expected her to take that vengeance from me. "You're lying," I said, but my voice was unsteady. "I never lie," she said. "It's beneath me. And beneath you, Su Qing. You wanted them gone. I gave you that gift. You should thank me." I heard the Emperor shout something, but his words were drowned out by the roaring in my ears. I had spent the last 3 days dreaming of my family's fall. I had imagined their faces, their fear, their pleading. But I had not imagined this. I had not imagined that I would feel nothing. Because that was the truth. I felt nothing. No grief. No anger. No relief. Just a vast, empty silence where my heart used to be. "You're wrong," I said, and my voice was steady again. "I don't thank you. I don't thank anyone. I take what I want, and I take it myself." I lunged forward, my dagger aimed at her throat. The Empress Dowager's guards moved to intercept me, but Weijia was faster. He cut down 2 of them in a single stroke, his sword a blur of steel and fury. I pushed through the chaos, my eyes fixed on the old woman on the throne. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just watched me come, her smile never wavering. Kill me, she said, her voice almost a whisper. And you'll never know the truth. About the Prince of Ning. About the rebellion. About why your family really sold you. You'll never know the name of the man who gave the order. I stopped, my dagger inches from her heart. What are you talking about? Your family didn't sell you to the Prince of Ning, she said. They sold you to me. I was the one who arranged the match. I was the one who promised your father a seat on the council if he gave you to my allies. You were never a bargaining chip, Su Qing. You were a weapon. And you were aimed at me. My mind reeled. The Prince of Ning. The rebellion. The Empress Dowager. It all connected in a way I had never imagined. My family hadn't been trying to elevate themselves. They had been trying to survive. To appease a woman who could destroy them with a word. The Prince of Ning was supposed to marry you and use your influence to bring your father's allies into my network, she continued. But he fell in love with you. Or he thought he did. He wanted to protect you. He wanted to keep you out of the rebellion. So he betrayed me. And I had him arrested. And now he's dead too. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process her words. The prince. The man I had hated. The man who had left me to die in the mud. He had tried to protect me. The thought was so absurd, so impossible, that I almost laughed. You're lying, I said again, but my voice was weaker this time. I'm not, she said. Ask Weijia. He knows the truth. He was my spy long before he was the Emperor's guard. I turned to look at Weijia. His face was expressionless, but he didn't deny it. He didn't move. He just stood there, his sword dripping with blood, his eyes fixed on me. I'm sorry, he said. I had no choice. The betrayal hit me harder than any blade. I had trusted him. I had let him guard my back. And all along, he had been working for the woman who had destroyed my life. Kill her, the Empress Dowager said, her voice calm. Kill her, and I'll give you the reward I promised. Weijia didn't move. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, regret, perhaps. Or pity. No, he said. I won't. The Empress Dowager's smile flickered. What I said no, he repeated. I've been your spy for 10 years. I've done everything you asked. But I won't kill an unarmed woman. Not even for you. The Empress Dowager rose from the throne, her face twisted with rage. Then you'll die with her. She raised her hand, and her soldiers surged forward. Weijia met them head-on, his sword blazing, but there were too many of them. I saw him fall, a blade in his side, and I screamed. The Emperor was at my side then, pulling me back, dragging me toward the door. We have to go, he shouted. No. I let him pull me, my eyes still fixed on the chaos behind us. The Empress Dowager was shouting orders, her soldiers pouring into the hall. The fires were spreading, the smoke thick and choking. We ran through the corridors, the Emperor and I, with nothing but our swords and our desperation. The palace was burning around us, the walls collapsing, the screams of the dying echoing in our ears. And when we finally burst through the gates into the chaos of the city, I turned back and watched the palace burn. The Empress Dowager was still inside. I had no idea if she was dead or alive. But I knew one thing, I would never stop hunting her. I would never stop hunting anyone who had wronged me. Because I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Trust was a weapon. And I would never hand it to anyone again. The Emperor collapsed beside me, his face pale and bloodied. We need to get to the Eastern Garrison, he gasped. I have loyal troops there. We can regroup. Fight back. I nodded, helping him to his feet. The city was in chaos, soldiers fighting in the streets, buildings burning, the screams of the innocent filling the air. But I had survived. I had survived the hunting ground. I had survived the palace. I would survive this too. And when it was over, I would find the Empress Dowager. I would find Weijia. I would find everyone who had ever used me or betrayed me. And I would make them pay. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. And this time, I was playing for keeps. The Eastern Garrison was a fortress of desperation. We arrived at dawn, the Emperor and I, covered in ash and blood, our horses collapsing beneath us as we passed through the gates. The soldiers there were loyal. I could see it in their eyes when they recognized their sovereign. But loyalty alone would not save us. The Empress Dowager had the palace. She had the treasury. She had the army that had been camped at the northern pass, now marching south under her command. I stood on the ramparts and watched the smoke rise from the capital. The city was burning, the flames licking at the sky like hungry tongues. Somewhere in that inferno was the Empress Dowager, and somewhere in that inferno was the truth I had been denied for so long. The truth about the Prince of Ning. The truth about my family. The truth about the man who had given the order that started it all. The Emperor joined me on the ramparts, his face haggard but resolute. He had changed in the hours since we fled the palace. The weight of the crown had settled on his shoulders, and he carried it with a grim determination that I had not seen before. "We have 3,000 men," he said. "She has 20,000. And she's marching on the garrison as we speak. We have maybe 2 days before she arrives." I nodded, my eyes still fixed on the distant smoke. "Then we use those 2 days wisely. We fortify. We prepare. And we wait." He turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face. "You sound like you have a plan." "I always have a plan," I said. "The question is whether you're willing to follow it." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm the Emperor. I don't follow. I lead." "Then lead," I said. "But know this. The Empress Dowager didn't win because she's stronger. She won because she's smarter. She knew my family's weaknesses. She knew the palace's secrets. She knew how to turn people against each other. And she's been doing it for decades." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you propose?" I turned to face him fully, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I propose we stop fighting her army and start fighting her mind. She expects us to fortify. She expects us to defend. She expects us to play the game by the rules she wrote. So we're going to break every single one of them." The next 2 days were a blur of activity. I worked alongside the soldiers, directing the fortifications, organizing the supply lines, planning every detail of the defense. But beneath the surface, I was weaving a different plan, a plan that had nothing to do with walls and weapons and everything to do with the human heart. I sent messengers into the city, disguised as merchants and beggars, carrying whispers that would spread like wildfire through the Empress Dowager's ranks. I told them stories of her betrayal. I told them about the Prince of Ning, executed on her orders. I told them about the generals who had been promised lands and titles, only to be discarded like broken toys. I planted seeds of doubt, and I watered them with rumors until they grew into something that could not be ignored. And then I waited. On the second night, Weijia came to me. He was wounded, his side bandaged, his face pale from blood loss. But he was alive. He had escaped the palace, just as I had hoped. And he had brought something with him, the ledgers I had asked the Emperor for, the complete set of my mother's accounts. "I found them in the Empress Dowager's private chambers," he said, placing the heavy scrolls on the table before me. She kept them as proof of her control. Every transaction, every bribe, every betrayal. It's all here. I looked at him, my eyes cold. "Why are you helping me? You betrayed me once. Why should I trust you now?" He met my gaze without flinching. "Because I've seen what she does to people who outlive their usefulness. I was useful to her for 10 years. But as soon as I refused to kill you, I became a liability. She would have killed me if I hadn't escaped. I have nowhere else to go." I studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. His face was open, his eyes steady. But I had learned the hard way not to trust appearances. "I don't trust you," I said. "And I probably never will. But you're useful. And I need all the usefulness I can get. So you'll stay. You'll fight. And when this is over, you'll leave. You'll disappear. And I'll never see your face again." He nodded, a flicker of something, regret, gratitude, passing through his eyes. "That's more than I deserve." I turned back to the ledgers, my fingers tracing the names and numbers. My mother had been thorough. Every transaction was recorded in her precise, elegant script, each entry accompanied by the name of the recipient and the date of the payment. The Prince of Ning, the Northern Generals, the Empress Dowager's personal spies. And there, at the bottom of the final page, a name I had never expected to see. Weijia. He had been paid. Regularly, for years. The amounts were small, but they added up. My mother had been buying his loyalty long before he ever set foot in the palace. I looked up, my hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at my belt. You were on my mother's payroll, I said, my voice cold. You worked for her too. Weijia didn't flinch. Your mother was one of many. I was a spy, Su Qing. I worked for whoever paid me. It wasn't personal. It was survival. Survival, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. That's what you call it. That's what everyone calls it. Betrayal, lies, murder, it's all just survival. But it's not. It's choice. And you chose to sell yourself to the highest bidder. You're right, he said, his voice quiet. I did. And I'm not proud of it. But I've changed. I've seen what happens when you spend your whole life serving people who don't care about you. And I don't want to be that man anymore. I stared at him, the dagger still in my hand. Everything in me wanted to drive it into his chest. He had betrayed me. He had lied to me. He had watched me suffer and done nothing to stop it. But I also knew that killing him would serve no purpose. He was useful. And I needed every advantage I could get. Fine, I said, sheathing the dagger. You live. For now. But if you betray me again, I won't hesitate. I'll kill you myself, and I won't lose a single moment of sleep over it. He nodded, accepting my terms without argument. I turned back to the ledgers, my mind racing. The names and numbers were overwhelming, but there was a pattern buried in the chaos. A single thread that connected everything: the Empress Dowager, the Prince of Ning, my mother, the generals, the spies. A thread that led back to a single source. The Empress Dowager's personal secretary. A man named Lu Feng. He was the one who had coordinated the payments, arranged the meetings, kept the records. He was the key to everything. And he was still in the palace. I found the emperor in the war room, surrounded by his generals. They were arguing about strategy, their voices raised, their faces flushed with frustration. I pushed through the crowd and placed the ledgers on the table before him. I know how to win, I said. But I need you to trust me. The room fell silent. The generals stared at me, their expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. The emperor looked at the ledgers, then at me. Explain, he said. Lu Feng, I said. The Empress Dowager's personal secretary. He's the one who coordinated everything: the payments, the meetings, the betrayals. He's the only one who knows the full scope of her network. If we can turn him, we can expose her. We can tear her apart from the inside. The emperor's eyes narrowed. And how do you propose we turn him? He's been loyal to the Empress Dowager for 20 years. Everyone has a weakness, I said. And I know his. He has a daughter. A legitimate daughter, not a secret one. She lives in the capital, and she's getting married next month. He's been saving for her dowry for years. If we can offer him something he wants more than his loyalty to the Empress Dowager, he'll turn. The emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. And you think you can get to him? The palace is surrounded. The Empress Dowager's forces are everywhere. I don't need to get into the palace, I said. I need to get into his heart. And I know exactly how to do it. The next morning, I sent a messenger into the city with a letter addressed to Lu Feng's daughter. The letter was simple, a note of congratulations on her upcoming wedding, accompanied by a small gift of gold. The kind of gift a woman of my station would offer to a woman of hers. Nothing suspicious. Nothing threatening. Just a gesture of goodwill. But the real message was hidden in the wrapping. A single word, written in my mother's hand, copied from the ledgers. A word that would tell Lu Feng that I knew everything. I didn't have to wait long for his response. He sent a messenger back that same evening, a young man with a trembling voice and a desperate plea. Lu Feng wanted to meet. He wanted to talk. He wanted to negotiate. I met him in a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a small building hidden behind a crumbling wall. Weijia accompanied me, his hand on his sword, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of betrayal. Lu Feng was waiting for us when we arrived, his face haggard, his hands shaking. Lady Su, he said, bowing deeply. I didn't expect. I know about your daughter, I said, cutting him off. I know about the dowry. I know about the debts. I know everything, Lu Feng. And I know that you're terrified of what the Empress Dowager will do to her if you fail. He stared at me, his face pale. What do you want from me? Everything, I said. Every name. Every date. Every transaction. The Empress Dowager is going to lose this war, Lu Feng. She just doesn't know it yet. And when she does, she's going to take everyone down with her. Unless you give me the evidence I need to stop her. He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a sealed scroll. This is everything, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The full account of her network. The names of every general, every minister, every spy. The evidence of her corruption. It's all here. I took the scroll, my hands steady despite the pounding of my heart. Thank you, I said. You've done the right thing. Please, he said, his voice cracking. Protect my daughter. She doesn't know anything. She's innocent. She'll be protected, I said. I give you my word. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. Lady Sue, there's something else. Something I didn't put in the scroll. Something I didn't think you needed to know. I turned back, my eyes fixed on his face. What is it? The Empress Dowager has a backup plan, he said. If the rebellion fails, she's going to activate a secondary network. A network of assassins. They're hidden throughout the capital, waiting for her signal. If she dies, they'll kill everyone she's ever targeted. Including you. I felt a chill run down my spine. How many assassins? 47, he said. All trained, all armed, all ready to strike. I have their names. I have their locations. But I won't give them to you unless you promise me something. What? Promise me that when this is over, you'll let me disappear. Me and my daughter. We'll leave the capital. We'll never return. And no one will ever find us. I looked at him, this broken man who had spent 20 years serving a monster. He was not a hero. He was not a victim. He was a survivor, just like me. I promise, I said. When this is over, you and your daughter will be free. I'll make sure of it. He handed me a second scroll, smaller than the first, and I tucked it into my sleeve. Weijia was at my side as we left the safe house, his face grim. 47 assassins, he murmured. That's more than we can handle. Then we don't handle them, I said. We outsmart them. We turn their own network against them. The next 2 days were a blur of preparations. I worked with Weijia to map the assassins' locations, planning a coordinated strike that would neutralize them before they could activate. The Emperor gave me his full support, ordering his soldiers to follow my commands without question. The generals who had questioned me before were now silent, their skepticism replaced by grudging respect. On the third day, the Empress Dowager's army arrived. They were massive, 20,000 soldiers, their banners flying high, their weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. They surrounded the garrison, cutting off all routes of escape. But I had been waiting for this moment. I climbed to the top of the ramparts, the Emperor at my side, and I raised my voice to address the army below. Soldiers of the Empire, I shouted, my voice carrying across the silence. Your Empress Dowager has lied to you. She has promised you glory, but she has delivered only death. She has used you as pawns in her game, and she will discard you the moment you are no longer useful. I have the evidence here, her ledgers, her letters, her betrayals. I will read them all out loud, so that you can see the truth for yourselves. I unrolled the scroll that Lu Feng had given me, and I began to read. The names, the dates, the amounts. The bribery, the corruption, the murder. The soldiers listened, their faces changing from confusion to shock to anger. By the time I was finished, there was no doubt left in their minds. Your Empress Dowager is a traitor, I said. And I will not rest until she is brought to justice. But you have a choice. You can fight for her and die for her. Or you can lay down your weapons and walk away. I will not harm you. I will not punish you. I will let you return to your homes and your families. All I ask is that you do not raise your swords against the Emperor. The silence stretched out like a living thing. Then, one by one, the soldiers began to lay down their weapons. The sound of steel hitting the ground was like thunder, rolling across the field in waves. And in the center of it all, I saw her. The Empress Dowager, seated on her horse, her face a mask of cold fury. She knew she had lost. But she was not ready to admit defeat. This isn't over, she called out, her voice carrying across the chaos. You may have won today, Su Qing. But I will never stop hunting you. I will never stop. She never finished her sentence. An arrow, fired from somewhere in the crowd, struck her in the chest. She toppled from her horse, her body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The soldiers around her scattered, screaming, as the chaos erupted into full-scale panic. I stared at her body, lying in the mud. The woman who had destroyed my family. The woman who had betrayed me. The woman who had tried to kill me. She was dead. And I had not been the one to kill her. But I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Just the same vast, empty silence that had been with me since I had watched the palace burn. The Emperor was at my side, his hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he said. "She's gone." I nodded, but I didn't look away from the body. "It's not over," I said. "It's never over. She had 47 assassins. And they're still out there. Waiting." He was silent for a moment, his hand tightening on my shoulder. "Then we'll find them. We'll stop them. Together." I finally turned to look at him, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I had not expected. Respect. And something else, something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time. Hope. The 47 names burned in my memory like brands on flesh. I had spent the night after the Empress Dowager's death memorizing every single one, tracing each assassin's location, their habits, their weaknesses. Lu Feng had given me the keys to their destruction, but he had also given me a warning I could not ignore. The assassins were not loyal to the Empress Dowager. They were loyal to the gold she paid them. And gold, I had learned, could be bought and sold like anything else. I stood in the war room of the Eastern Garrison, the scrolls spread across the table before me. The Emperor was there, along with Wei Zhe and a handful of his most trusted generals. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on all of us. "We have two options," I said, my voice steady. "We can hunt them down one by one, which will take weeks and cost lives. Or we can turn them. We can offer them more gold than the Empress Dowager ever promised, and we can make them ours." The Emperor frowned, his fingers drumming against the table. "And you think they'll accept these are assassins? They've killed for a living. They don't have loyalties." "They have loyalties to their own survival," I said. "That's the only loyalty that matters. And right now, their paymaster is dead. They have no one to pay them, no one to protect them, no one to give them orders. They're scared. They're desperate. And desperate people make desperate choices." Wei Zhe stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "I know some of these names. I've worked with a few of them before. If I approach them, they might listen." I looked at him, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would they listen to you? You were a spy for the Empress Dowager. You're just as compromised as they are." He met my gaze without flinching. "Because I'm still alive. That means something to men like them. It means I know how to survive. And right now, survival is the only thing they care about." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Do it. But take a guard with you. If they turn on you, I want you to have a way out." Wei Zhe bowed and left the room, his footsteps echoing in the silence. I turned back to the scroll, my eyes scanning the names. 47. Some of them I recognized: former soldiers, disgraced officials, men who had been cast out of society and had found a new purpose in killing. Others were strangers, their names meaning nothing to me. But they all had one thing in common. They had been bought. And if I could buy them back, I could use them. The first 3 days were a blur of negotiations and near disasters. Wei Zhe and his team moved through the city, approaching the assassins one by one. Some of them were easy to turn. They had been expecting the Empress Dowager's death, and they had been planning their next move long before we ever approached them. Others were harder, their loyalty to the gold they had been promised overriding their fear of death. But by the end of the 3rd day, we had turned 32 of them. The remaining 15 were holdouts, men who refused to believe the Empress Dowager was truly dead, or who had been promised something more valuable than gold. Revenge. Power. A chance to rise above their station. I knew I would have to deal with them personally. I found the first holdout in a tavern in the Eastern Quarter. His name was Zheng Wei, a former soldier who had been dishonorably discharged after killing a superior officer. He was drunk, his eyes glassy, his hand never straying far from the dagger at his belt. I approached his table alone, my hands visible, my expression calm. "Zheng Wei," I said, taking the seat across from him. "I have a proposition for you." He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "You're the woman who killed the Empress Dowager. I heard about you. You're either very brave or very stupid." "I'm very alive," I said. "That's the only thing that matters. And I'm offering you the same chance I offered your colleagues. Come work for me. I'll pay you double what she paid you. And I'll give you something she never could." He leaned forward, his breath reeking of wine. "And what's that of a future?" I said. "The Empress Dowager was going to discard you the moment you outlived your usefulness. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use you for as long as you're useful, and when you're not useful anymore, I'm going to let you walk away. With your gold. With your life. With your freedom." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You're lying. Everyone lies." "I'm not lying," I said. "I've been lied to my whole life. I know what it looks like. And I've made a promise to myself never to do it to anyone else." He studied me for a long moment. Then he reached for the flask on the table and took a long drink. "Fine," he said, his voice slurred. "I'll work for you. But if you betray me, I'll kill you. And I won't make it quick." I smiled. That smile. I wouldn't expect anything less. By the end of the 4th day, we had turned 41 of the 47 assassins. The remaining 6 were the most dangerous, men who had been with the Empress Dowager since the beginning, who knew her secrets and her plans, who had been promised everything and would not settle for less. They had gone underground, hiding in the sewers and abandoned buildings of the capital, waiting for their moment to strike. I knew I had to find them before they found me. Weijia came to me that night, his face pale, his hands shaking. "I found them," he said. "They're hiding in the old imperial crypts, beneath the Temple of Heaven. They've been there for days, waiting for the right moment to attack. They've sworn to avenge the Empress Dowager's death." I nodded, my mind racing. The imperial crypts were a maze of tunnels and chambers, built centuries ago to house the remains of the emperors and their families. If the assassins were hiding there, they could hold out for weeks, picking off anyone who came near. "We have to go in," I said. "Tonight. Before they have a chance to move." The emperor was against it. He stood in the war room, his face set in a hard line, his hands clenched at his sides. "It's too dangerous. You don't know what's down there. They could have traps. They could have allies. They could be waiting for you to walk into their ambush." "I know what's down there," I said. "And I know how to handle it. I've been in worse places than a crypt. I've been left for dead in a hunting ground. I've been betrayed by everyone I loved. I've survived an assassination attempt in a garden and a coup in a palace. A crypt is nothing." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's not nothing. It's the place where they bury the dead. And I don't want you to join them." I met his gaze, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that I had not seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. "I'll come back," I said. "I always come back." He didn't argue. He just nodded, his jaw tight, and watched me as I left the room. The crypts were dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. I led the way, a torch in one hand, a dagger in the other. Weijia was behind me, his sword drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows. Behind him came 20 of the turned assassins, their faces grim, their weapons ready. We moved through the tunnels in silence, our footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The crypts were a labyrinth, the passages twisting and turning without rhyme or reason. But I had studied the maps Lu Feng had given me, and I knew exactly where we were going. The assassins were waiting for us in the main chamber, a vast space filled with the sarcophagi of emperors long dead. They had barricaded the entrance with stone slabs and debris, but we had anticipated that. One of the turned assassins, a man named Li Bao, had been a sapper in the Northern Army. He placed a small charge against the barricade, and the explosion echoed through the tunnels like thunder. We surged through the breach, our weapons flashing in the torchlight. The assassins were caught off guard, their defenses shattered by the explosion. But they were professionals, and they recovered quickly. The fight was brutal, a chaotic dance of steel and blood in the flickering shadows. I saw one of them break away from the main fight, a tall man with a scarred face and empty eyes. He was running toward me, his sword raised, his teeth bared in a snarl. I ducked under his swing, driving my dagger into his side. He grunted, stumbling, and I twisted the blade before pulling it free. But as he fell, I saw movement in the shadows behind him. Another assassin, smaller, faster, moving like a ghost. He was already lunging toward me, his blade aimed at my heart. I didn't have time to dodge. I didn't have time to block. I just had time to realize that this was the end. And then Weijia was there, his body between me and the blade. He took the hit, the steel piercing his shoulder, and he drove his own sword into the assassin's chest. The assassin crumpled to the ground, and Weijia staggered, his face pale, his hand pressed against the wound. No, I said, catching him as he fell. No, you don't get to die for me. He laughed, a weak, bloody sound. I told you. I told you I'd protect you. Shut up, I said, pressing my hand against his wound. You're not dying. Not today. The fight was over. The remaining assassins had been subdued, their weapons taken, their hands bound. I knelt beside Weijia, my hands covered in his blood, and I watched as his eyes fluttered closed. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and pain. I carried him out of the crypts myself, my arms straining, my legs burning. The Emperor was waiting for us at the entrance, his face pale with fear. He took one look at Weijia and called for the physicians. The physicians worked through the night, their hands steady, their faces grim. I sat outside the tent, my hands still covered in Weijia's blood, and I waited. The Emperor was there too, pacing back and forth, his hands clenched at his sides. He's going to make it, I said finally, my voice flat. He has to. The Emperor stopped pacing and looked at me. You care about him, he said. It wasn't a question. I care about everyone who's willing to die for me, I said. It's a small group. I try to hold on to them. He was silent for a long moment. Then he sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing against mine. You're not alone anymore, Su Qing. You don't have to do everything by yourself. I looked at him, and for the first time, I let myself believe him. It was a small thing, a fragile thing, but it was there. A seed of hope in the wasteland of my heart. The physician emerged from the tent, his face tired but relieved. He'll live, he said. The wound was deep, but it missed the artery. He'll need rest and care, but he'll survive. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I stood up, my legs shaky, and I walked into the tent. Weijia was lying on a cot, his face pale, but his eyes open. He looked at me, and a weak smile crossed his lips. Told you I'd come back, he said. I smiled, the first real smile I had smiled in months. You're an idiot, I said. A brave idiot, but an idiot. He laughed, then winced as the movement tugged at his wound. I'll take that as a compliment. I sat beside him, and I took his hand in mine. Thank you, I said. For everything. He squeezed my hand, his grip weak but steady. You don't have to thank me. You're worth dying for, Su Qing. I hope you know that. I didn't know if I believed him. But I wanted to. I wanted to believe that I was worth something, that my life mattered, that the pain I had endured had not been in vain. The next few weeks were a time of healing. The Emperor worked tirelessly to rebuild the capital, to restore order to the court, to root out the last remnants of the Empress Dowager's network. I worked alongside him, my voice steady, my purpose clear. Weijia recovered slowly, his strength returning day by day. And the turned assassins were integrated into the Emperor's guard, their skills put to use for a cause they could believe in. But I knew that the wounds I carried were deeper than any blade could reach. The betrayal of my family. The death of my innocence. The years I had spent as a tool, a pawn, a weapon. Those wounds would take longer to heal. Maybe they would never heal. I stood on the ramparts of the rebuilt palace, looking out over the city. The smoke had cleared, the fires had been extinguished, and the people were returning to their homes. Life was slowly returning to normal. But I knew that I would never be normal again. The Emperor found me there, his footsteps soft against the stone. You've been quiet lately, he said. Is something wrong? I shook my head. I'm just thinking. About everything that's happened. About what comes next. He stood beside me, his eyes fixed on the horizon. What do you want to do next? You've earned your freedom. You could leave. You could start a new life somewhere else. No one would blame you. I was silent for a long moment. The thought of leaving, of walking away from all of this, was tempting. But it also felt like running. And I had spent my whole life running from my family, from my fate, from the truth. I want to stay, I said finally. I want to help you rebuild. I want to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. He turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face. You're sure there's no going back if you stay? You'll be a part of this world, whether you like it or not. I smiled. That smile. The one that had saved my life more times than I could count. I've never been sure of anything in my life, I said. But I'm sure of this. I'm not running anymore. I'm going to stand and fight. For myself. For the people who can't fight for themselves. For everyone who's ever been used and discarded. He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. Then we'll do it together, he said. I can't promise that it will be easy. But I can promise that you won't be alone. I looked at him, this man who had been a stranger to me just weeks ago. He had given me a chance when no one else would. He had trusted me when everyone else had betrayed me. And he had fought beside me when the world was burning around us. I know, I said. Thank you. We stood there in silence, watching the sun set over the Capitol. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, the same colors I had seen on the day I was reborn in the mud of the hunting ground. But this time, the colors felt different. They felt like hope. They felt like a new beginning. I had been broken, betrayed, and left for dead. But I had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. I had faced my enemies and defeated them. I had faced my fears and conquered them. And I had faced myself, the woman I had become, and I had accepted her. I was Su Qing, the daughter who was sold, the sister who was betrayed, the woman who died once and lived twice. And I was finally, truly, living for myself. The game was over. But my life was just beginning. And I was ready to write my own story.